And good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I am still very much trying to get over uh, this tooth issue that I developed on my trip to Australia last week. Had to go to the dentist yesterday. Yeah, that was not fun. And Well, it's just not fun. uh, as I said yesterday, that there's just nothing that hurts quite as bad as a toothache. I was getting ready to go to bed last night, and I mean, the headache, the tooth, I hadn't taken my pain medicine quite on time, and I mean, it just came raging through. And it's like, hasn't this thing gotten any better at all? And so, um, yeah, I was ready to go to the dentist yesterday. And that was actually Sunday night. Here it is Tuesday morning. So, anyway, um, hopefully, I'm going to be getting better over this. But the pain meds and the antibiotics that he has given me are definitely affecting my mental acuity. I can tell you that. I hate it with a purple passion. I hate to take medicine at all. All right, I'm a natural guy, if you please, and so when I have to take these pain medications that are so artificial. That's the only way I know to talk about it. And then when they start affecting me and I feel like I'm in a cloud, I feel like I'm not 100% on top of my game. Boy, I don't like that at all. And so do the best we can. We keep on going. And I did that in Australia. And the folks told me over there, and the folks who have watched the videos said, well, we couldn't tell you were hurting at all. We couldn't tell you were taking meds. We couldn't tell anything at all. You sounded to us like you were absolutely on top of your game. Well, I appreciate that very much. But internally, I tell you, I just don't feel good at all. Okay, so I want to begin now to pick up where I left off before the trip to Australia. This is video number 154 in our ongoing study of the Feast of Sukkot and the overall Feast of Israel. How the Feast of Israel were viewed as types and shadows of the coming consummation. The final three feast days, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and of course Sukkot, were considered to be the eschatological feasts. They foreshadowed the judgment, the coming of the Lord, the kingdom. They foreshadowed the resurrection. They foreshadowed the new creation. We'll get into more of all of these aspects when we begin to discuss Shemoneh Atzeret. That was the feast the day after the final feast. But the significance of the eighth day feast there is just absolutely incredible. You're going to enjoy that, so be sure to stay tuned. And by the way, thank you so much for all of the new subscribers. We're now well over 9,000 subscribers. We're on our way to 10,000, and we're going to get there before the end of the year. So thank you for joining us. And I think, I hope, and I pray all of these lessons are going to enrich you, and they're going to lift you up in faith. They're going to make you believe even more firmly, wonderfully, and warmly about the God that we serve, and to know that He has kept His word. I'm not going to go into detail here and share with you some of the absolutely marvelous testimonies that were given to me while I was in Australia of people coming up to me just one after another and just telling me of how the message of covenant eschatology has changed their life, has brought them closer to the Lord, made them fall in love even more and more with the Lord. And that's so wonderful to hear. All right, it truly is wonderful to hear. So, again, this morning, I want to continue our study because we've been focused on the timing of the fulfillment of the Feast of Sukkot. Now, let me remind you very, very quickly. The Feast of Sukkot was the Feast of Harvest, the Feast of Ingathering. It was also called the Feast of the Joy of the Nations because on Sukkot, a total of 70 sacrifices were given as a symbolic gesture of sacrifice being offered for all the known nations of the earth. Because Israel believed, and men such as N.T. Wright, Scott McKnight, Alfred Edersheim, and others state that the Jews believed in the first century. There was a widespread belief that whatever happened to Israel happened to the nations. And thus, when Israel was finding favor with God through obedience, the nations were finding acceptance by God if they too were walking so far as they were able in conformity with the law. Now, they didn't observe the feast days. They didn't observe circumcision. They didn't observe the Sabbath. And yet, they still observed moral concepts, moral laws, if you please. And so it's really, really critical to understand how important Sukkot was. It is important to understand when that feast day of ingathering, when that feast day of resurrection would finally be fulfilled. Now, for the month of April, I'm going to be putting my book, Resurrection Feast Fulfilled, a study of Sukkot, Israel's last feast days, and its relationship with resurrection. I put it on special a couple of months ago. I'm going to be repeating it along with another book. I'll announce that later in the week. So be looking for that because you want to see, folks, you want to see how critical this eschatological feast of Sukkot really genuinely was for our understanding of eschatology. Okay, got to get on here. So when was the ingathering? When was Sukkot to be finally fulfilled? I've spent at least a couple of videos now with you on Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12 spoke of the resurrection, which is the time of the harvest, according to Jesus in Matthew chapter 13. And in that great prophecy, one angel asked another, when shall these things be? Well, what are those things that are being inquired about? The great tribulation, the end of the age, the resurrection. So one angel asked another, when shall these things be? What shall be the end or the time when these wonders shall be fulfilled? And the other angel lifts his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and it says, it shall be for a time, times, and a half time, and when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all of these things, and notice he says, all of these things, not some of them, all of these things will be fulfilled. Now, point number one, very quickly. It has been argued by some people, well, everyone knows, pun intended, that in the Bible, all doesn't always mean all. Yes, I'm aware of that. But upon what basis do we determine from Daniel chapter 12 that all doesn't mean all? We cannot approach the text and say, well, all doesn't mean all because the resurrection didn't happen. That is presuppositional. That is allowing theology to drive interpretation instead of interpretation determining theology. So once again, it's not appropriate and it's not right. It's not good exegesis. It's not proper hermeneutic to say, well, we know that all doesn't mean all in Daniel chapter 12 because we know, as the dispensationalists would say, the Great Tribulation didn't happen or has not happened. We know that all in Daniel chapter 12 doesn't mean all because the resurrection hasn't happened. We know that all doesn't mean all in Daniel chapter 12 because the end of the age hasn't arrived. So here's what happens. You got to catch the irony of this. You got to catch the power of this. Depending upon what futurist view you take, people wind up saying, pay careful attention here, they wind up saying none of these things will be fulfilled when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. Now, why do I say that? Well, because the dispensationalist says great tribulation hasn't happened yet. All futurists say resurrection hasn't happened yet. All three futurist views say, well, yeah, there was an end of the age in AD 70, but not the real end of the age at the time of the resurrection. So when the angel asked, when shall these things be fulfilled? And the answer is, when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all of these things will be fulfilled. What we're really being told, ladies and gentlemen, is that none of those things have been fulfilled. Well, if none of those things have been fulfilled, if the Great Tribulation hasn't occurred, if the resurrection hasn't occurred, if the end of the age has not occurred, then the power of the holy people has not been completely shattered or scattered. I'm sorry, that doesn't work at all. Now, why does that not work? Well, since beginning this series on Daniel chapter 12, I had several different people make several different suggestions, claims, none of which they've even attempted to prove, that, well, here's the deal. If you say that all of those things would be fulfilled when Old Covenant Israel would be destroyed, when her covenant relationship with Yahweh would be fulfilled, then you're saying something that the Bible never teaches. And you inquire and you say, well, what is that? And they respond, as even while I was in Australia, one individual posted on my YouTube, and he says, you cannot say this was fulfilled in AD 70 when Israel was destroyed, because God said of Israel, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So how can you say Daniel chapter 12 was fulfilled at the destruction of Israel in AD 70? I say this with all kindness, with all due respect. That is a very, very myopic view of the statement, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So tomorrow, I'm going to look into this. Is it proper to say that God promised that he would never, ever, ever, ever destroy Israel, Old Covenant Israel? Is it proper to say that he would never, ever forsake them? Is it accurate to say that God would never break the Old Covenant relationship that he had with Israel? You don't want to miss it. So I'll see you on the flip side.